Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulil Kareem, wa ala ali wa ashabi, wa man istanna bi sunnati ila yawmiddin. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. In the previous session, we ended with the 22nd verse, and of course this was after looking at the 21st verse, in which we looked at the decision made by the people in the time of the youths who were in the cave to build a structure over their grave, and we talked about its implications, etc. And in the 22nd verse, we looked at the different statements which were made concerning how many they were and whether they were 3, the dog being the 4th, 5, the dog being the 6th, etc. And we confirmed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has affirmed that their number were in fact 7, with the dog being the 8th. And we said that Allah also told us to avoid arguing with them about it, as there really is not that much benefit in it on one hand, and on the other hand, Allah knows best really what their numbers were, and those types of arguments, like other scholastic type arguments which have developed in different religions, only distance people away from the true spirit of the faith, as the faith is not something which is only analyzed or discussed at length from an academic perspective, but a living faith which each and every one of us has to accept within our hearts for that faith to be real. At the end of the verse, we mentioned Allah had said, "Nor ask anyone concerning them." And we said that this was a prohibition in terms of asking Christians and Jews about the sleepers, because they don't have certain information. But it doesn't mean that we may not ask them about other things. We may not take information concerning other things. And this was an important point, because we know there is a well-known narration in which Umar ibn al-Khattab had spoken to the Prophet ﷺ about the Torah, what had been taught to him or shown to him of the Torah. And when he did this, the Prophet ﷺ had become quite angry about it. And on the basis of this, some people concluded that it is not permissible to study the books of the Christians and the Jews at all. For a Muslim, this is not something permissible. However, there are other narrations, one of the very famous ones, containing the same verse, the same statement of the Prophet ﷺ, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً, convey whatever you've learned from me, even if it's only a single verse from the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ went on to say, وَحَدِّثُوا عَنْ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَلَا حَرَجٍ, and you may speak about the children of Israel and without any sin involved in it. And we also have the Prophet ﷺ saying, إِذَا حَدَثَكُمْ أَهْلُ الْكِتَابِ فَلَا تُصَدِّقُوهُمْ وَلَا تُكَذِّبُوهُمْ, that if the people of the book relate information to you, you don't declare what they're saying to be correct unless it is confirmed from our own sources, nor do you declare them to be lies unless it contradicts what we have. If it contradicts what is in the Quran or the Sunnah, then we know it's lies. But what is in between, then we remain on a neutral level. And it is this material which we may narrate from them, along with the material which is confirmed by what we have in our sources. And the scholars themselves discussed about it, pointing out that it is permissible to go in, for example, like the story of Musa or the story of Yusuf, both of which are found in the Quran as well as in the Torah, and where there are certain details which further explain some elements of the story from the Quran, that one may narrate this information. So when it comes to the area of da'wah, of course, where we know that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did question the Jews. And there is a case where a man and woman had committed adultery and they were to be punished, and the Prophet ﷺ had asked them, what does your book say about it? Knowing already what it says, but they claimed it didn't say anything beyond beating them, lashing them. And one of the companions, who was a convert from Judaism, he had told the Prophet ﷺ that this was a lie. So the Prophet ﷺ told him to bring the book and read from it that the punishment was in fact stoning, just as in the Quran. So we have the practice of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We have other statements of his, which when you put the two together, what scholars have explained, like Ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari explains that the original prohibition for Umar ibn al-Khattab was in the early stages when the laws of Islam were not established. But once they were established, then to hear about their laws, no problem, because Islamic laws were already established, people knew about them, and they could look at it in a comparative fashion which would not be confusing. Whereas if it were prior to the establishment of the laws, then it would be confusing for those who had not already learned the laws of Islam, they had not been revealed, etc. So this is why the Prophet ﷺ, reacted so strongly to Umar ibn al-Khattab's suggestion that they utilize the Torah for the extraction of certain laws. Now on to verse 23 and 24. Together, وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ وَقُلْ عَسَىٰ أَن يَهْدِيَنِ رَبِّي لِأَقْرَبَ مِنْ هَذَا رَشَدًا. And do not say, I will not do something tomorrow, without saying, if Allah wills. But remember your Lord when you forget, and say, it may be that my Lord guides me to a nearer way of truth than this. So the verse begins with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ the correct etiquette for speaking about doing things in the future. What is the correct etiquette? Now, in most of the books of Tafseer that you read, you will find that the commentators have linked this to the incident we spoke about earlier, where people had come from the Meccans had gone to Medina, or people from Medina, Jews from Medina had come to the Meccans and told them to ask the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ 3 questions. And he said, I will tell you tomorrow, without saying, Insha'Allah. So this is in the books, in most of the books that you will read, as being the reason for the revelation of this verse, and also for part of the surah. However, this story is not authentic. No matter the fact that you're reading Ibn Kathir, you will find it mentioned throughout this whole issue of the story of the cave. You will find it in Adwa al-Bayan, you will find it in Qurtubi, you'll find it in all of the books. But in fact, the story is not authentic. So we can't use it as an explanation for the revelation of the verse. Because what they were going on to say is that after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, I will tell you tomorrow, then revelation about it was delayed for some weeks, some said weeks, some say months. But this, as I said, this story, so usually when they go to explain this part of the verse, they use that as an explanation that the Prophet ﷺ had made this mistake. Allah was correcting him for this particular mistake, And this was the reason for revelation of this verse in particular. But as I said, this is not an authentic story. No matter how often you hear it, and no matter where you read it, it has no support from the authentic books of hadith and narration. It's found in the surah of Ibn Hisham, but there are many other things also found there which are not authentic. So this is not the explanation. The correct explanation is just Allah is laying down etiquette. The etiquette for the Prophet ﷺ and for the Ummah as a whole. That when speaking about the future, which is something beyond our knowledge, that we should always link it to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ did give us a story about Prophet Solomon or Sulaiman and Dawood, and the son of Dawood, in which he said that tonight he would visit all of his wives, 70 of his wives. Some narration said 90. And each one of them will give birth to a son who will fight for the sake of Allah. It was said to him, say, if Allah wills. But he ignored it and didn't say it. He went to the women, but none of them gave birth except for one who gave birth to a half-formed child, a deformed child. And the Prophet ﷺ went on to say, had he said it, they would all have fought in the way of Allah. So the example, if we want to use an example, this is the one we can use. This is authentically narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari as well as Sahih Muslim. And do not say, I will do something tomorrow without saying if Allah wills. Of course, tomorrow here means the future in general. It doesn't necessarily just mean tomorrow. So if you talk about next week and not just tomorrow, it's okay. No, tomorrow means the future. In Arabic, ghadan can be used to refer not only to the actual day to come, but the time to come. That by adding Allah's will, one gains two basic benefits from making a statement and adding insha'Allah. The first of which is that one turns over one's affairs to Allah, so Allah has promised to make things easy for you. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Whoever fears Allah, Allah will make a way for them. He will provide from them from where they don't expect it. So Allah's promise is there that if we trust in Him, He will make things easier for us. So one benefits by adding inshallah to whatever we say about the future in that way. Secondly, if one makes an oath, one says, by Allah, I'm going to do so and so, inshallah, then if one is unable to do that, then he has not broken or she has not broken her oath or his oath. So there's not a requirement for expiation from the oath. If he says, I will do this as a means of informing and not as a certainty about its occurrence, the statement of Allah's wish is not required. If one says, I will do this as a means of informing and not as a means of expressing certainty about its occurrence, then using insha'Allah is not a requirement. It's still better, but not, you will not have gone against what Allah has said here. This is Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen was explaining this point. He said, for example, if your friend asked you, will you pass by my place tomorrow? And you said yes, without saying, Allah willing, there's no harm, because it is information about your intention. Information about your intention. And what is in your heart has been permitted by Allah. It's information about your intention. Meaning, when you say yes, you mean I intend to visit. I'm not being yes mean absolutely I will visit. No, you're just expressing your intention. And that intention can only take place by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you don't have to say inshallah about your intention. Allah has already given permission for that intention. However, if you intended that it would take place, you did intend really definitely, I do plan to come, I am coming, I'm definitely coming, then you should say inshallah. Because ultimately you don't know, no one knows whether it will take place or not. We don't have that knowledge of the future. But remember your Lord when you forget. وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. But remember your Lord when you forget. This means remember your Lord's command by saying, Allah willing, if you forget to say it. Because people could forget, and if they do so, then Allah Almighty has said, رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. Our Lord, do not hold us accountable if we forget or fall into error. That's Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 286. And Anas ibn Malik, he reported that the Prophet ﷺ had said, مَنْ نَسِيَ صَلَاةً أَوْ نَامَ عَنْهَا فكفارتها أن يصليها إذا ذكرها. The atonement for one who forgets a prayer or oversleeps it is to pray it whenever he remembers. The atonement for one who forgets a prayer or oversleeps it is to pray it whenever he remembers. So this is one of the interpretations of this verse here, that when Allah said, mention your Lord or remember your Lord if you are forgiven, that this is related to what was said before. Do not say, I will do something tomorrow without saying, if Allah wills. But remember your Lord when you forget. In other words, whenever you forget to do that, then say, inshallah. And scholars actually went into some details to analyze its implications. Because there is a statement, authentic statement from Ibn Abbas, that remember your Lord when you forget. He said, if a person a person may say, if Allah wills, even if it is a year later. Even if it is a year later, you remember a year later that you didn't say, Allah willing, and you say it a year later, then it works. You can use it. You can do this. Right? Because Allah has not placed in this, when He said, وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ, remember your Lord when you forget. He didn't put any time frame on it. Right? However, others, scholars, explain that this statement of Ibn Abbas should not be taken as it implies, as it obviously implies. Because if we do that, then virtually any arrangement or any agreement we make, we can excuse ourselves out of it by later on saying inshallah. But, we don't function like that. So what is meant here, as he said, as Ibn Kathir had said, that what this really means is that from a perspective of the Sunnah, if you have forgotten, it is good for you to say inshallah, but the rules concerning breaking your oath still apply. If you have broken your oath, you still have to atone for breaking your oath, even if you say inshallah later on. And the scholars try to specify at what point does it become too late. And Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen, he supported the opinion that once if a person sits down and makes that statement and then gets up and leaves, then that is the point at which it's too late now to say inshallah to affect the breaking of an oath. Meaning that if you swore by Allah you're going to do something, and you said inshallah before getting up from that sitting, then you didn't do it, you have not broken your oath, because you added inshallah. But if you got up, after getting up, he went his way, you went your way, and then you remembered and said inshallah, it's too late. Right? If you break your oath, you have broken your oath. And he based this, the scholars who took that position base it on a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which was narrated by Hakim ibn Hizam, in which the Prophet ﷺ was quoted as saying, the buyer and the seller have a choice as long as they don't separate or until they separate. The buyer and the seller have a choice. Means you're selling something to somebody, you're buying something from somebody. The sale may be complete, but as long as you're still sitting there, you can change your mind. Say, okay, no, I changed my mind. Please give me my money back. But if you've gotten up and left, then the right to say, give me my money back now, is gone. The choice is gone. You may ask, and if the seller decides, okay, no problem, take it back, he can do this. But your right is lost. Your right to demand, I don't want it anymore, give me my money back, it's lost once you get up and leave. There is another interpretation of this verse that, and remember your Lord when you forget, is not related to what came before. Right? And do not say I will do something tomorrow without saying if Allah wills. End. A new statement Allah is saying now, because actually this is a second verse, is verse number 24. But remember your Lord. But remember your Lord when you forget. Actually this is, except without saying inshallah is actually a part of the 24th verse too. But remember your Lord when you forget is a new statement in which Allah is here talking about things in general. That whenever one forgets to do something, then we remember Allah, and this is a means of driving away Satan. A means of driving away Satan. Because it is in forgetfulness that Satan is able to operate. As Allah said in Surah Al-Kahf, we'll be taking it later, verse 63, when Musa and his servant were going on the journey, and the servant left the fish by the rock. Later on, Musa asked him, where's the fish? Where's our food? He said, do you remember when we took shelter at the rock? Most certainly, that is where I forgot the fish. It was only Satan who caused me to forget, and it took an amazing path into the sea. Right? So the servant there attributes it back to Satan. Now, if this was something incorrect, an incorrect attribution, forgetfulness being attributed to Satan, then Allah would correct it, or Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would correct it. So when we find something in the Quran, it means Allah has affirmed it. If we find a practice related to those who are righteous, then it means Allah has affirmed it. Similarly, in Surah Al-Mujadilah, 58th chapter, verse 19, Allah says there, Satan has overtaken them, and he made them forget the remembrance of Allah. And also in Surah Al-An'am, and if Satan causes you to forget, then, after remembering, do not sit in the company of those people who are wrongdoers. That's verse 68. So, forgetfulness is ultimately from Satan. Satan, in getting to Adam, did the same thing. Chatted to them about the benefits of eating from the tree and caused them to forget Allah's instruction. And they fell. Right? So, by remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a way of warding off Satan. As Allah said in Surah Al-Zukhruf, verse 36, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ يُقَيِّضْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِينٌ. I will appoint a devil for whoever turns away blindly from the remembrance of the Most Gracious, and he will be his constant companion. So when one turns away from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah fixes for him a devil, a qareen, who will be with him whispering and encouraging him to evil. And we have in Surah Nas, min sharril waswasil khannas, seeking refuge in Allah. Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas. Allah says, say, I seek refuge in the Lord of humankind from the evil whisperer, shaitan, who will desert you in your time of need while pretending to be your close ally. Following that, Allah said, remember your Lord when you forget and say, it may be that my Lord guides me to a nearer way of truth than this. Of course, when you say it may be, it implies a certain amount of doubt. It may be. In Arabic, asa. However, the scholars have explained that when this term, asa, or maybe, is used from the perspective of human beings, this means that they are hopeful that it be that way. But when Allah uses that term, asa, it means definitely it will occur. And the proof of that can be found in Surah Nisa, verse 98 and 99, where Allah says there, except the weak ones from among men, women, and children, who cannot devise a plan, nor are they able to direct their way. These are they whom Allah may forgive, and Allah is ever oft forgiving, oft pardoning. It says Allah, those whom Allah may forgive, but actually this is Allah will certainly forgive them. There's no doubt in the matter. So this verse, basically, as we said, focuses on etiquette in terms of speaking toward in future. And it involves putting our trust in Allah. And this is what we find really in all of the other things that we're instructed to do, that we ultimately make an effort, but we put our trust in Allah. By saying inshallah, it means that no matter what level of certainty we may have about achieving something, we know ultimately it is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what Salat al-Istikhara is about, isn't it? Turning our affair to Allah, over to Allah. Unfortunately, many people mistakenly think that istikhara, because you're talking about the future again, istikhara is for things for the future. Is this a good choice on my part or not? Actually, people do istikhara even without making a choice. Parents do istikhara for their children. People go to sheikhs and say, Sheikh, can you make istikhara for me? No. Actually, this is not how istikhara works at all. Istikhara is following the same principle here, turning one's affair over to Allah after we have made the effort. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, if any of you decides on a matter, meaning you use whatever knowledge you have, whatever means you have, to find out about this matter that you want to do. If you have come to a conclusion that this is the best way, then you make 2 rak'ah and you make your dua, where you admit before Allah that Allah knows the future, knows what is unseen, and you have the power over all things. So if this thing is good for me, then make it easy for me. If it's good for me in my religion, my life, then make it easy for me and bless me in it. But if it is not good for me, then take it away from me and remove it from my heart and replace it with something better and make me pleased with that which you have chosen. That is the dua of istikhara. So this means, if you think about the text of the dua, it is not possible for somebody else to do it for you. It is something you have to do yourself. Whether Maulana or whether parents or whatever, no. You have to do it yourself. And you must do it after you have made a choice. Not when you don't know, is it this or that? Should I do this or should I do that? So you say, I'm making istikhara. Now, how are you going to fit that into the dua? It doesn't work. Because you're saying, if this thing that you have chosen is good for me, you say, if one of these things is good for me, no. You have changed. You have changed the dua. So it should be after a decision has been taken that we make the istikhara. And as I said, it's like everything else that we do, we always turn our affair over to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the end, knowing that He is the one who will decide ultimately what is good for us and what is not. In verse 25, Allah goes on to say, وَلَبِثُوا فِي كَهْفِهِمْ 300 سِنِينَ وَازْدَادُوا تِسْعًا. So they stayed in the cave for 300 years and 9 more. Here Allah tells the messenger the actual time that the youth spent in the cave, from the time that he caused them to fall asleep to the time that he resurrected them and they were discovered. And the difference in the times, when he said 300 and 9 more, or they increased it by 9, depending on how you translate it, that this in fact covers the solar and the lunar calendars. For the people of that area, among Christians or with Greek Roman tradition, they would have counted according to Gregorian calendar. They count according to the solar calendar. And 300 years of the solar calendar is equivalent to 309 years of the lunar calendar. Because every 100 years, the difference is 3 years. So over 300 years, it is 9 years. And this is the explanation which was given by leading scholars, Ibn Kathir, Ibn al-Qurtubi, al-Shawkani and others.